Hi, my name is Zizaran, and this is another guide for 3.9 Metamorph League, this time featuring Vortex and in a never-before-seen collaboration with Steel Mage. Steel's a good friend of mine, sometimes helps me out with POBs and stuff for League Start, because I think he's just lazy making build guides, so I basically make build guides out of his POBs just to throw some more solid guides at y'all. And this is something he's played a lot. I've played it a little bit. I'm not a massive fan, I'll tell you why. But this is an extremely strong build, probably the strongest build this league, especially considering there's so many bosses. And also something I considered very heavily as my league starter. Very strong for hardcore and softcore if you're doing bosses and stuff like that. And doesn't have too bad clear speed on an Occultist because you do get the Profane Bloom explosion. So it is a extremely strong build and also something that is pretty easy to set together on solo self-found. There's no like required uniques that you need or anything like that. So that's why I figured this would be a great build to show off for this boss league with, like, you know, we have like Awakener and all, like the $50,000 US event. So some pretty cool stuff. With that being said, I'm gonna show you guys the video of me explaining how I do the guides with POBs and stuff like that. If you watched one of my guides before, you can skip this by clicking down in the description. We're gonna have like a skip link. If you haven't, and this is the first time you're watching one of my guides, I would suggest watching this. It's basically me explaining specifically how I do my guides with, we do like a step-by-step for the leveling process and stuff like that. First, I'm going to start by explaining how we use Path of Building in the guides, and we use it quite a lot more than most guides you might be used to. If you've already seen this part, you can move to the description down below and click a timestamp button to skip directly to the guide. So first you need Path of Building. Path of Building is a third-party program that you can download, and it's in the description down below. It's completely safe, and most people use it. It's a very powerful tool that lets you plan out your builds and import items, stuff like that. Now, once you have Path of Building, you can go and import the Path of Building link here by pasting it here. Once you have that, it should look, well, depends what build you're importing, because I'll use this for everything. But it should look like the build of the video you're watching. And what we do, and I'm using a Gladiator Thunder Cyclone build here as an example, I show a step-by-step of what the skill tree looks like at certain levels. So at early levels, it's very, very easy, especially if you're a new player, to follow. And I also say when to ascend, and the ascension points are generally here, and I'll talk about that in the specific video as well and why things are chosen. But as you can see, the skill tree is evolving over time, and sometimes there will be variations for, you know, if it's like different weapons, if it's one-hander, two-hander, and a lot of things like that. But wait, there's more. Under the skills, we usually do all like the different skills plus the leveling one. I'm trying out a new sort of like alphabetized group. So this is like your main attack skill. So as you can see here, you have ground slam to 8 to 12, but at 12 it gets replaced by Sunder, and I kept that in the same like A, just so you're understanding what I'm replacing it with if there's no leveling video accompanying it. So hopefully that'll make it very clear. Same here with, obviously, at early level you're using Ancestral Protector, and then you replace that same B with War Chief later on. So we'll also put notes, like for example here, Pulverize doesn't exist yet in Path of Building, and there's a few things that they're just not in Path of Building at the time that I'm making this guide. This is going to happen a lot on videos that are made around launch, just Path of Building's not updated yet. So that's just not much we can do about. And for the most part, I'll always put gems in a priority level. Like my first priority is always going to be Onslaught, just because it ups your clear speed so much while killing. And you can see like different utilities and stuff. And another example here is plus blood and sand, because that again doesn't exist in Path of Building. We also have different types of items. So here we have early game axis, mid game axis, and end game axis. I think the jewels are displayed here. Yes. So the way I do this is I make some like fairly okay items that are like, you know, depending on how fast you play, somewhere that you'll have them between day 1 to 3. And if you don't know how to get a tabula, for example, you can farm that in Act 9 fairly easily in Blood Aqueduct. And we go through here, and it's I never in my guides will put resists on the life gear, because just you need to be resist capped. That's very important. 75% all resist. Remember that you lose resist in Act 5 and 10. And then on the jewels, I'll try to do 4-slot jewels and try to say as many good stats as possible for that build. So there's no like, you don't see the same one twice here, but all of these work for the build. Hopefully that'll help. And then this is generally how I recommend rolling flasks. There's even more in the notes as well. Mr. Madiki will generally go through and tell you exactly where to buy the skill gems that you're needed. This is actually a tip by another streamer called Lyric, who said it was sad there was nothing like this in Path of Exile guides. I was like, that is actually a great idea for new players. So we have that. So if you're wondering where to buy things, or if it can't be bought by your specific class, we call it a mule, that you have to use another character to use it or to buy it, and all the details for that is in here. So hopefully it now makes more sense how to use the guides and how they work. Let's continue with the build guide. So again, Vortex is basically an instant skill, so you can cast it while moving. As you can see on Steel in the background here, it's also like popping like the explosions from the Profane Bloom, giving it some like nice clear speed. You're also using Cold Snap for increased damage, and this also gives you Frenzy charges. You also have Val Cold Snap, which gives you Frenzy charges on a boss. However, that's obviously not going to last super long, but because we do get Val skills during boss fights now as well, then that definitely helps out with the damage. Total damage on like a fairly decent Vortex build probably ends up being a little bit over 1 million Shaper DPS. So while it's not the craziest damage in the world, it's definitely enough to take on like really high HP bosses. Where this really shines, it's the sustain with the especially taking things like Wicked Ward and then also Vile Bastion. So yeah, it's a super tanky, especially when you're going Chaos Inoculation, which is it removes all of your life, leaving 1, so you don't die, and then you just focus on scaling Energy Shield. So you should be able to very easily get like 8 or 9k, and with like really good gear, you can get up to like 12. Now, obviously, this is like quite a lot higher than normal life values, but obviously you do not have a instant life flask. Now, for leveling this, you don't really use Vortex until you're level 55. Using it earlier can be pretty rough. So you're actually going to be using Orb of Storms and Stormblast Mine. Now, they did get pretty heavily nerfed in the patch, and that means that you actually need to invest into weapons. So something like the Vendor recipe, using a rare Sapphire Ring, a Alteration, and a Blue Wand is going to give you a decent amount of flat added to spells. After the nerf, I'd say you need to get some okay wands even while leveling. Before, you refine on basically white or blue wands all the way to level 70 with a build like that, but now you definitely do want some investment. That being said, they should be completely fine, and you could also try adding in maybe Flamethrower Trap if the damage turns out to be too low. Obviously, this is slightly hard to predict without having played with all the new nerfs for this, but once you get to level 55, you swap over to Vortex, and that has not been nerfed. Now, as you can see, Vortex is definitely not like a crazy fast speed clear build like a bow, tornado shot, or something like that, but it definitely holds its own. It's mostly getting carried by the Profane Bloom explosion, and that helps a lot with the speed. But Occultist really shines in having decent staying power versus bosses, and also decent single target damage. So it does turn out to be a very, very good all-around build, and like I said, this is probably one of the most likely competitors for getting the first Awakener kill. So as per normal in my guides, you can see that we've included Normal, Cruel, and Merc Lab in the Ascendancies. So it shows off like exactly which one you take when, and it as regular shows you like a step-by-step leveling process. This is the only one of my starter guides currently that has a CI version built into it. So CI is using this node up here. Again, Means that you're only scaling energy shield and you don't need life on any of your items. So something that's extra nice for that is going out of your way into Delve and farming dense fossils. So dense fossils drops in the petrified forest and the fungal caverns. So these are the ones that you really, really want to look out for if you want these fossils. And it's definitely worth making the change. If you've never played Chaos Inoculation before and done like a full energy shield build, it can be very intimidating. One of the things that I found very hard when I did it myself was I was very used to clicking 2, 3, 4, 5 for my flasks and then having Q as a movement ability. But changing to low life and Chaos Inoculation for the first time was what made me do, you know, obviously you're using all your flasks as utility flasks then, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I had to start changing to space as my movement bar. And that's actually like helped me, I feel like it's improved my gameplay quite a lot. It's a lot nicer movement skill key than Q. So as you can see in the items, we've got a CI set and a life hybrid set, showing some examples of items here. And one of the most important stats for this build is cold damage over time multiplier. You can also get a shit ton of spell damage now. They've increased the amount of spell damage we can get on both one-handers and two-handers. So you should see a big number increase there. I think the max now is like 109 or 120 compared to the old 70. So it's great. And on the hybrid version as well, do make sure that you do get energy shield items like, you know, sorcerer boots, hubris circlet, stuff like that. Tabula rasa is definitely worth farming in Blood Aqueduct. And another option as well is spamming Val's side areas. That's a decent chance to get a 6ing from those. And if you don't get the colors that you want, but it's on a, for example, energy shield piece, then you can recolor all crafted items in your crafting bench. It just costs Val orbs on top of the regular chromes. So for example, 1 blue would be 4 chromes and 4 Val orbs. Flasks is something that I cannot stress enough how important it is. So make sure that you look at the flasks I've suggested. Make sure you get at least staunching removal. Normally I'd say heat as well, but we get that from our Ascendancy. Warding or curse immunity is the second highest priority, and grounding is then your next one. Onslaught on kill is really big. It's not something we can normally get from degens like this, but because of the searching eye or murderous eye, that's actually doable. Same for ED. I would normally suggest a searching eye because there's a slightly higher chance to roll onslaught on a searching eye than it is on a murderous. For the CI setup, you can check that all the gear has energy shield on it, and these are like not like crazy high energy shield numbers. 280 shield, 230 helmet, 600 chest is probably like the highest one here, but this is like I think that's a tier 1 or tier 2 roll with a low hybrid and then a crafted flat. So this is even like achievable in solo self-found. So as you can see, that's like 10.7k ES. So if you get some really beefy, you're looking at hitting like 12 to 13k. Faded Breath as well should be fairly easy to find at solo self-found by the time you're actually switching over to Chaos Inoculation. It's a very, very common belt, but obviously the increased energy shield on it is very nice. Room is Concoction as well, very nice. Adds a lot of block to your build and helps keep you alive. Especially since we have freeze immunity from our build, it frees up more flasks to let us actually use uniques. Pantheon for this build is Solaris and Critical, and the Bandit would be Skill Point. Now, something that's really important about this build is to remember that it has EE. So the way Elemental Equilibrium works is that if I hit it with a lightning skill, it's going to take more cold and fire damage. However, it's important to remember that if you hit it with a cold skill, it's going to take less cold damage. So you do need to make sure that you aren't doing that. Now, with Vortex, if you're like, gotta remember, Vortex does have an initial hit. So the way that'll do is when you're vortexing, you'll actually be doing less damage. However, because Vortex only hit once, if you have a Stormbrand down on something, it's going to obviously continue hitting it with the lightning skill, which is going to activate the lightning EE. And the important part to note here is that the degen from Vortex does not count as a hit. So because Stormbrand keeps hitting, that's what is going to be like the activated Elemental Equilibrium. That means that for trash clearing and stuff like that, where you're only running around vortexing, you're technically going to be doing less damage to them. Obviously, this isn't that important because white, blue, and rare monsters don't have very much life at all, and it's mostly bosses where you care about getting that insane big damage boost, which is minus 50% cold resist. Elemental Overload as well, obviously procs whenever we're doing critical strikes, and that's another good reason for having Stormbrand. And whenever Stormbrand crits, it's going to give us 40% more elemental damage for 8 seconds. The main anointment I would recommend for this build is Prodigal Perfection. It's quite a lot of damage, even though it's not particularly far away. We just don't have that many spare points to spend. So it's cheap, really high damage, definitely worth taking. Should be plenty of room to fit as many gems as you need. There's no crazy uniques clogging up your socket spots or anything like that. Should be no mana issues on this build. Very early on, you can just use a mana flask. And later on, you shouldn't have any issues with mana at all. Just normal, regular uniques is going to be good for this build. +1 lightning, obviously, early on. And something that would be nice would be fossil gloves. So you could do, for example, metallic and a scorched fossil, or a metallic and a frigid fossil on a glove. And I would generally try to buy a low item level one just off the vendor in Act 1 on a new character would be fine. Because the mods that you're looking for is just special delve ones, and they're like generic damage. They won't say to spells or attacks. It's going to add it to your attacks, to your spells, and even your heralds, which spell damage normally doesn't add to. But on top of that, Occultist gets a lot of energy shield back whenever he kills monsters. So especially in boss fights that have like minions, you're going to start getting like a lot of energy shield back mid-fight. You can also use Vaal Discipline to start your recharge at any time. So for auras, it's amazing if you can get an Enlighten up in here. Obviously on solo self-found, that's going to be very hard. You would most likely, without a Enlighten at all, you would be running Blasphemy, Discipline, and Flesh and Stone. You'd have a hard time running Skitterbots without an Enlighten because it's a higher percentage aura. Also, you can experiment. Instead of, for example, Flesh and Stone or accept Skitterbots or something, you can try running Herald of Ash. It's supposed to help quite a lot with your clear speed. It's something to do with like Profane Bloom. So that's something to experiment with as well. Obviously, make sure that you're running a Blasphemy setup, because this is how you get your Profane Bloom explosions. So there are some drawbacks to this build. Obviously, there's a cooldown on Vortex, and that can be a little clunky to get used to. And just Vortex and Cold Snap in general might not feel like... It's not like you're directly killing them. I don't know how else to explain it, but obviously with like bows or freezing pulse, it's more of like a direct killing. This is, you know, degen killing. So it feels very differently. Not everybody likes that, but it is an insanely strong build. It does have a bit slower clear speed than something like Elemental Hit or Tornado Shot as well. So make sure you watch out for that. But all in all, an insane build, and probably one of the strongest, if not the strongest choice for the upcoming Metamorph League. If you have any questions or if you have any compliments about the build, come by twitch.tv/Zizaran. If you have any complaints or if you feel anything was done badly, feel free to come by twitch.tv/SteelMage202. So if anything was wrong, it was all SteelMage's fault. Hopefully you have a great Metamorph League, and do remember that we're doing massive giveaways through all of December. We'll be announcing them ahead of time on the Twitter, so check that out. One of the coolest prizes is by MSI, and it's a huge desktop computer. So check that out, and all the giveaways will be on twitch.tv/Zizaran. And hope you guys have an amazing Christmas. Thanks for watching, and try to die less than I do.